What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki, and I am back from my break. The burnout isn't totally over, but I'm able to come back, make this video for you guys. I really hope you get to enjoy it. Sorry for the delay on this chapter review. I hope I can bring at least one bit of new insight to this chapter for you, so that to atone for the fact that it's so late. That said, for those of you who don't know, usually do page-by-page breakdowns, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing with this chapter, because there's a lot of play-by-play reels that's kind of really important to emphasize the different nature of these characters and like what's been going on, because it's callback city as it's been. So just kind of wanted to address all this. So first off, we get the idea that Deku is not entirely sold on going back to UA, but he doesn't feel like fighting anymore. He's tired, he's exhausted, and deep down he knows that he needs his rest. That's kind of the opening start of this, with him deciding he's not going to run away from Ida anymore. He's just too tired, and that's really for the better, regardless of whether or not he ends up truly committing to staying at UA. What's more important is that he fully at least take some time to heal and rest, because all he's doing is opening himself up to more vulnerability. Now, what I really liked though is that we see, Uraraka control the gravity, and we don't have Bakugo in the air with them this time to soften the landing with the explosions like they did at Kamino, but instead what we have is still the whole bringing it back home, with Kirishima originally being the thing that helped them break through the wall and get up the ramp and all that other good stuff. Now we see him being there, being a wall that doesn't move, that doesn't break, and being there to catch Deku and Ida as they're landing on the ground, because he can handle the impact. Call back once again to that thing Bakugo said, being a wall that doesn't fall is more than enough. And once again, props to Horikoshi, showing that like it wouldn't be as simple as, oh, Kirishima is a big hard object so he can catch them, but instead makes it a point to honor that like with that much force he is going to end up going through quite a bit. Finally coming full circle too, not only referencing what Bakugo said during the Rappa fight, but also referencing what we learned of the flashback about Kirishima, when he was talking about how there was a kid who rushed into the sludge villain and he felt like he could never measure up to that. And we finally got to see, and it's especially important that this conversation and realization is happening after the war for Kirishima, because now he's had these moments of freezing up, he's had these moments of wavering. The Rappa fight, you can say, well, he made that progress, but he wavered at a moment in that fight. Here, there's no wavering. Against Makia, there was no wavering. Now that he, in a sense, has that equal, non-wavering, rushing in approach that Deku has, now it's the time for him to talk to him and realize this is the energy that Midoriya has. This is who that was all the way back then. Which means that he's also realizing that it was Bakugo who was likely the one being saved. And he makes it a point to emphasize that that wasn't about, his powers or anything like that. Deku doesn't need to define himself by one for all. Deku has gone from identifying himself too heavily on being quirkless and letting that be the main thing that he focuses on, to now defining himself by the quirk he was given. Still not seeing that he's more than just a vessel or a tool for society, not fully recognizing his individuality, which is ironic because of the fact that that's what Kosei originally translated to, was individuality and not quirk, but the fans want a quirk. In this case, it's important to note that because Deku's using a borrowed individuality, he still can't see himself. And he might not be able to see himself very well for a very long time. But I'm hoping that this is starting to be the change that like lets him not identify himself by, quote, his individuality, but instead by his actual individuality and his actual self. Now, we see Mina that does the thing that like you can tell some of the students are closer and some of the students have more perspective than others, and Mina emphasizes this again, where she kind of brings up classes and stuff like that, but Deku admits that he's too scared for all the people at UA and he doesn't want to make trouble, and how it can't just go back to how it was. And now Deku is right when he says that things can't go back to how they were. After all, society has been completely put into shambles. But what's worth establishing also is that going back to how things were is not the actual ideal scenario for society as a whole. It will just create this same problem on a larger scale further down the line, especially as we get closer and closer to quirk singularity theory. And if you're like me, you have already leaned into the idea that the red eyes and the white hair is a sign of the quote omega class mutants, as the best way to put it. We see this with Decay and Shigaraki having one of the most powerful and destructive quirks, and how it has such a strong impact on who he is as a person. And we can see the same thing with Eri, with Rewind, high power, very easy to use, very destructive. So I think that that's kind of what's been set up here with these white hair, red-eyed characters. Is that's when you see those characters with those designs, that's like one of the big signs. Even 9 with his white hair, like it seems like the stress of these high-level quirks automatically makes your hair white. Seems to be what I'm getting out of this. That weather manipulation, that rewind, but like 9 didn't have the red eyes necessarily, so. But his quirk was also killing him. So it seems like if you're compatible, you get white hair, red eyes. If it's going to be too much, you're just going to get the white hair from the stress. But that's an entirely separate discussion, I suppose. Now, what I wanted to do then is segue into how, while yes, they can't go back to things being the exact same, they don't need to go back to things being the exact same. And the best thing to highlight that is what Bakugo does next. Deku talks about things going back to being the same, and Bakugo make sure that even if he came back to school, things will never be the same between the two of them, because he starts talking about and asking Deku if he remembers what was going on in the war arc when he tried to save him. And he was trying to tell him, hey, I don't want you to win on your own. And he needed to tell him that his body moved on his own, and that's how he ended up getting stabbed. But more than that, he starts talking about how he looked down on him because he was quirkless and he was supposed to be beneath him. But in reality, he always felt like he was above him. And it kept happening over and over again, emphasizing once again that his view of Deku being beneath him because he was quirkless is a direct byproduct of society's teachings, and his feelings of Deku being above him are a response to Deku's character. That is... I'm just glad that I finally don't have to argue about that anymore, if I'm being honest. I hated it. I couldn't bear to look at you. I couldn't accept the way you are. All these things he was struggling with because these two ideas in his head did not make sense. How is it that one of the most heroic people he knows is quirkless? It's a complete aberration within their society. It's not what quirk society is supposed to be about. A quirkless person isn't supposed to be the most heroic. That doesn't make sense. And so it's this whole turning up on its head of reality that Deku's existence truly is, even before he had One for All. And he himself needs to learn how to see that. And that's also emphasized in Kirishima's words this chapter. And that's part of what Ida was talking about last chapter when he was talking about rushing and being able to, try to challenge Midoriya. Speaking of Ida, real quick, I want to segue into that because I forgot to mention this when I said at the start of the chapter. The reason why Ida grabs Deku's hand with his left hand is because that is the hand that was injured during the Stain arc. That reaching out and extending a hand thing, once again coming to town and roosting. Bonus details on this. While the left hand is the one that was injured by Stain and is the one that he reaches out and the one that he says would be a symbol that he would keep injured until he became a proper hero, the right hand is the one that he punched Deku in the face with at Kamino. This small, consistent detail, his right hand being the one that pushed Deku away and his left hand being the one that reached out and being the one that was reflected and injured because of a trauma they shared together and their past experience, is brilliant. But back to Bakugo, just wanted to gush about that real quick. And he talks about pushing Deku away. And for once, for the first time in this series, we get Bakugo referring to him not as Deku, not as Midoriya, but he calls him Izuku. Something he has not done in probably 10 years. another reason why we get to see during this panel as he's talking to him that they go through all the years. They start off with what they look like in the river. They start off with what they looked like, and then they go to middle school. Then when they first got into UA, and the whole time there's more, like Deku's pupils and irises are slowly coming back to his eyes. But more importantly than that, Bakugo is looking down up until he talks to him and says, I don't expect stuff to be different, but I gotta speak the truth. And he's finally looking at Deku, and they're finally able to properly look at each other head on, and he apologizes for everything. And one of the things that I've been noticing is that Midoriya's hair has been consistently drawn differently. It could just be that he's dirty, but if you notice, Deku's hair did not always have these tinges of white in them. And now we're seeing that heavily emphasized throughout this arc. And I'm trying to figure out if this is actually the stress of everything going on slowly changing Deku's hair white, or if it's just a stylistic choice to make sure that we see that there is truly a difference in the state of mind and everything going on with Deku. And what I like about this is that they say there's nothing wrong with him trying to be a hero. There's nothing wrong with him trying to help people, but he needs to take care of himself too and let people help him help people. Yes, that quirk comes with a responsibility and a burden, and it requires you to basically do things with that power, optimizing it towards the betterment of society. But you can't do everything alone. All Might himself did not get to do everything alone. Yes, in Meathead battle encounters, he was able to do stuff by himself, sure, but that doesn't change that there was times where if All Might had worked with more people, who knows what else would have been different. If All Might had told other people about All for One when they went to take him down, maybe things would have been different. And yes, you can say the Hero Commission knew about All for One, but when people like Endeavor barely know, when people think All for One is a myth and not some dude that needs to be murked, there's a problem. And so Bakugo being the one to tell him saving people is how we win. Stop focusing on beating the crap out of every villain you can, and remember that you need to save people's hearts, because the same philosophy that All Might's been trying to teach him with the smile and stuff, but the idea behind the smile isn't so much that you can't have feelings. That's not it. What Nana said, and I think even All Might kind of missed this, is that the reason why you want to be so reassuring and why you want to save people is because anybody who needs saving is having one of the worst days in their life. And Deku finally apologizes for saying they couldn't keep up and basically saying they wouldn't be adequate heroes, because that's the implication. And Bakugo just says, we all get it. They understand that power scaling wise, he's getting above them, sure, but that doesn't make them any less of heroes. They're still his peers. They're still allowed to care, and they're still allowed to try and work together. And the fact that they were able to mastermind these strategies and stuff shows that there's value in that. And then we have Ochako just looking sad, and once again us setting up for the final moment where we're gonna see what's going on with her. And Deku's passed out, but they finally do bring him back to UA. 13's there. She sees it. We finally see what 13 looks like, and that's why I said she, because it very much does look like a woman now. But I'm not 100% sure still. We get confirmation that most people are now in shelters. People say that every day more people grow weary of the anti-hero ideology and decide to move into shelters, but I think that's more over, I don't think they mean like like we hate heroes. I think they mean to a certain degree like people trying to be the anti-hero and like going out trying to save the day, fighting and stuff like that. And they're like, all right, you know what, I'm not trying to do all this, let me just go home. We get confirmation that apparently this building can now combine with Shiketsu. What's worth noting is we have zero clue on how far away Shiketsu is from UA, but it's been stated that UA is in the east and Shiketsu the west. So I don't know if that blast sequence is going to be like some Power Ranger stuff where the buildings take off from the ground, transform, and then they combine and form a Zord. But that kind of seems to be the implication here. Ain't mad at it. And they talk about how Deku's, like the stuff that Deku's doing, other heroes are going to be able to help too, and it's going to be okay. But we're met with the mob. they don't want Deku there. They're saying Shigaraki was targeting that kid and he's the one. So like, and Mike's trying to get everybody to calm down. And they ask the same question that, they ask a question that Deku already like flopped to or moved away from. They ask, why is it gotta be UA? And when people used to, and when All Might asked Deku, why is it gotta be UA? He said, it's because All Might has been there. And now the reason why it's supposed to be UA is because that's where his friends are. That's where his home has been for the past year. And everybody's arguing about whether or not he's actually going to be safe. But the reality is that having a heavy hitter is still having a heavy hitter. And what I like about this is that whatever conversation is coming next is going to be intense, because it says Ida and them started linking this chain. They started forming Bakugo played his part 2, and we're not letting go of you now. We won't let you, because when heroes need protecting, who will be there to protect them? And what that effectively means is that there's a narration box, and these narration boxes are Ochakos. And I think that's a small detail that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but this is Ochako's narration. This isn't just her like having an internal thought process. This is effectively the story for a brief moment shifting into Ochako vision and saying, she is the center player in this next chapter. She is the focus. We may have more than one chapter focused on Ochako and her ideology and her confronting the fact that all these people want to be saved. They want to have people protect them. They want to have all these things. They want people to go out there and risk their life and limb and almost die for them. And when it's time for them to look out for somebody else, when it's time for them, when it's time for those heroes, those same people who sacrifice their lives to rest as weary heads, they don't care, and they don't want him to be safe. Like he's not allowed. He has to just be out in the streets and potentially die. And they're not even focused on why Shigaraki is even after him. That's the other thing, is that if you've heard these rumors about a guy with multiple quirks, and then you've heard about All for One, and you've seen Shigaraki, you know by now that he's got these powers. You know that the whole myth of All for One being able to steal quirks is a very real thing. Why on earth would you want him to be able to potentially access another quirk that has a bunch of quirks within it? There's a certain short-sightedness of people, and it's understandable because of the fact that their lives are in danger. And this is also why I say that like the tiring of the anti-hero mentality might not mean anti-hero, but like an anti-hero like Vegeta, because a lot of those people were just basically roaming in gangs and stuff and causing more problems than they were fixing. Just like when you see the fight with Cider House seems to have led with both like all of Cider House dead and the people who fought against them. So whatever is coming next is going to be something that's more focused on what it means for society to actually function, and how you can't keep trying to sacrifice a few people for the well-being of everybody, and everybody needs to start doing their part and contribute more, work together. And at the end of the day, this does lead into some of the Meta Liberation Army's ideologies, where we all need to be responsible and take care of stuff, but we also need to, you know, like obviously some people are better at the hero game than others, but that doesn't mean that they need to be treated as if they're not even humans, but just a prop and a tool within the system, which is a huge issue within this context, the lack of humanization of people whose obligations are to protect others. Ochako has seen people die. Ochako has seen Deku break his limbs. She's seen so many people get hurt and be in danger. And now she's going to explain, you don't understand just how bad this is. These are people with hearts that can despair. And I think that's kind of where this chapter and this story is going from here. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Again, sorry about the delay. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope, since I don't use like the camera a lot anymore, you just throw it on and get to relax. But yeah, that's just my take on the latest chapter of My Hero Academia. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I hope you can like and subscribe, maybe leave a comment discussing things. But I'm Aniki, and I'm out.